Welcome to New Zealand, Joe.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wasn't that a fun game of golf today?
Well, it was, except that the game really was divided into two phases.
Yeah, well, as usual, it comes down to the putting, doesn't it?
Well, it sure did seem that way today. It seems like when we analyzed the game, it's like we played two separate games. We played one game with 13 clubs, and then we play a whole nother game with just one club. But when it comes to scoring, it seems that out of the 18 holes, we have a score of 72 if you played regulation golf. But how many of those strokes were allocated to putting?
One thing that's very obvious, of course, is on tour, when we watch it on TV, the player who's putting badly, he's off the leaderboard. You don't win a tournament putting badly, do you?
Definitely not. You have to make the putts.
Well, Joe, I'm looking forward to this next bit. You sharing your knowledge from 50 years, how to use this magical instrument, the putter, the thing that we all sometimes love and sometimes hate. There's a bunch of styles of putting, and they seem to be in several different families. So how do you see putting? What do you think is the groups of putting, the styles of putting that link everything together?
Well, basically, you have to find your own style, and there's so many different styles to this game. When you watch all the putters out there, you can find many different putters, and you can find many different puttees. So there's certain styles for everyone. We also say that there's different strokes for different folks.
That's right.
It's a very personal thing when you get right down to what do you think is the best stroke for you. Once you decide that, we're going to find out that no matter who you go to as far as teaching you, there's different techniques for different teachers, different putters for different puttees, as I said. So the style that you pick is going to be something that is a very personal thing, but in order for you to be the best putter that you can be, you're going to have to experiment with a number of different strokes because there's so many different styles of hand positions, of lengths of putters, and you see out there on the tour that there's a lot of different people out there that are putting different ways.
Exactly, and in fact, what we're all seeing on tour is that the pros are embracing different methods. So shall we just get into some of the methods and just a couple of pointers about how you can use each method?
Okay, now being that we talked about all these different styles and all these different strokes, let me just show you a few that are pretty common out on the tour, and amateurs use a number of them that probably you won't see on the tour because they're very unusual and unique. But some of the basic ones, the regular length putter, for example, the putting strokes that most people use, first of all, the ones that work and don't work. Well, some of the ones that don't work would be the ones that are too wristy. And that's what we see an awful lot. And that's the reason why most putters are not necessarily good putters, is because they have too much action in the hands. And therefore, the angle of the club face is going to be a lot of different angles. So we can't get consistency that way.
People talk about pendulum putting with a shorty, right? Now, I've found this a bit of a problem, and I think you were alluding to it there, is if you're going to talk about a pendulum, you've got to ask the next question, where does the pendulum swing from?
Here's the idea. When you have a regular putter, that shaft ends right here. Well, that's not where your pendulum is going to end if you've got both hands on it and flipping at it. There's no pendulum stroke if you're doing this. The idea here is that you have to connect the shaft to your arm, to your shoulder. Now we have the pivot point in your left shoulder. Tick, tock, tick, tock. That's just a longer pendulum. Even though we can identify this as the longer pendulum, there are still players who will do this and think that they are letting this be the pivot point, but they're not necessarily doing that. So in a regular putting stroke, what we're trying to do with the overlapping grip are to keep hands both together, and we can have either the index finger straight down the shaft, or we can have it underneath. Some people like it in this manner because it gives them more direction and feel for the index finger. So in this method, with the left index finger overlapping, it keeps both hands united. So in this particular stroke, now we have this. Now that's just a regular stroke that you see most of the time out there on the tour with the normal, everyday type of hand position.
What sort of tension do you feel you've got in your hands there, Joe? Is that sort of...
Very good point, because one of the real difficult things about finger positions is that you don't want them tight and tense. And when I see some putters that are squeezing the handle, that automatically reduces the feel, because you can feel the tension going right up the forearm, and whenever you have tension, you have no feel. So we got to have the fingers very relaxed, very comfortable, and just let the fingers just make it move.
Seems to work again.
And it does work when you have the proper feel. There's no way you're going to be a good putter if you're too tight and tense. That's one of the strokes with the hand positions. Now we have other ones that you see an awful lot with the left hand low. Now being that the hand is low, now you have a straighter left arm and you have a little bit more direction going towards the cup with the left arm going towards the cup in this manner. Now in terms of which are you going to be, a puller or a thrower or a stroker with the dominant hand, is a matter of feel also. Now, even though your left hand is low, you can still be a right hand dominant putter. For example, it would look like this. Now, if the left hand is low and you're going to be putting with the right hand, you can still stroke it with more feel like this. So with the left hand low, you're going to see that you have good direction and it's more straight down. There's no bend in the elbow, that type of thing. And the right hand is still in control in this manner, so that you stroke it with the right hand.
So Joe, this is related to why, as a putter designer, I paid attention to being able to adjust the length. Because of course, what happens if you bring your hands up too high here, you create quite a weak position in your wrist here.
Right.
If we think of the famous left-hander on tour, he's got his hands down here like this. So what he's got is he's hanging his hands down there and letting them just be naturally extended through here. It's a little bit stronger, isn't it, than going the other way?
Right.
Yeah. Of course, he's a lefty, isn't he? Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Now, there's one other type of hand position that we see now with a few players out on the tour. I haven't seen too many of the amateurs using it, but for some reason or other, it works for the guys that are making money putting, so it must be effective. But what I believe it does, it eliminates this right hand flipping at it, because it's hard to flip the wrist this way and get the club face out of position. So with the claw position that we see, we have these fingers on top and the thumb underneath, and it's right in the valley of the hand with the thumb and the index finger, and you still have some feel in the right hand, but you can not have the wrist action.
So with this method, Joe, you mentioned with the left hand low, you can feel that it's a right hand pushing stroke or a left hand pulling, or maybe the two working together. Of course, with the claw, it just sort of intuitively feels it's more the right hand, isn't it?
I believe so. I don't know what some of the players out on the tour feel. I haven't really talked to them personally about are they feeling left, are they feeling right, but I think that's that personal style that you have to experiment with. If you want to experiment with the claw, just try it. Try it if you think that it's more right or you think that it's more left. I think in this position where you have the left hand high, it seems more appropriate that you would want the right hand in control.
So what do you think of Langer's method, the old sort of grab the... Do you think this is a good method, or...?
Well, it is if we want to be able to dominate with the right hand, we'll still dominate, but the interesting thing about Langer's grip is that it holds the left wrist kind of flat and firm.
Yeah, it does.
So that doesn't give much of a chance to be flippy. So it also works with the arm being straight right up to the shoulder, so when we stroke it this way, it's an unusual feeling, but I think that when you experiment with it, who knows, it might be your next stroke, but you have to try it.
And so at the end of the day, it's about you finding the way that works for you, isn't it?
Well, that's the whole key. You have to find a way that's going to work for you. You have to personalize it. You're your own personal fitter, and so you can adjust the length the way that you want it and eventually you're going to find one that works better than others.
You'll like this one. On the internet, wonderful source of information. So somebody put in a post on a discussion group, and the post was put in about March or April last year, and the question was, how many putters have you bought this year? And I thought to myself, well, that's got to be a stupid question. We're talking March and April. Anyway, the answers were 1, 3, 5, 1. These are very keen golfers, admittedly. You know, they go to a golf discussion group.
Well, it definitely is, but I don't necessarily think it's just the one putter that a person is going to try and feel like that's it. If it's a putter that they haven't adjusted the length, if they always use the same length, sometimes they're going to have the same problems. And that's why we'd like to see different lengths for different strokes to see which one will fit you. But not many people are going to go in and buy $150, $200 putters every time they want to change from one to the other. We have a lot of others to experiment with.
All right, should we look at belly putting and connected methods of putting?
Well, the connected method of putting definitely is the new trend as far as the longer putters, because all longer putters other than the regular are connected. I mean, the only thing connected here is with your hands, and that's where a lot of the problems come in. But when we get into a connected putter, you want me to experiment with this?
Yeah, sure. Do you want to just let me know if you need the length adjusted?
Okay, let me just see where this is.
See where that is. Is that good?
Now this is fine for a connected putter to my belly.
Okay, good.
Okay, so now what connected putter means, basically, if I wanted to give you an example of a pendulum stroke. Now, a lot of people have heard of, what is a pendulum stroke? Now, most people that I ask, what is their pendulum stroke? Well, sometimes they say their shoulders, their sternum, a lot of different parts. But basically, let's look at the principle of what a pendulum is. A pendulum is a fulcrum, a lever, and a bob. Now, a lever means that it's going to be moving tick-tock, tick-tock. Now, that's like a grandfather clock that you see. So now we do have the fulcrum is right into your belly. Now, that's going to be a fixed point. You can't move the fixed point and have a true pendulum. So we have the fixed point. Now we have the shaft as the lever, and we have the club head as the bob. And now we're just going to move the pendulum with our dominant hand back and through. Tick, tock. Now when we want to connect our other hand, we can do that in a number of ways. We can do the conventional, where we have the left hand, reverse overlap. We can have the right index finger down, and we can use this as our stroke. Remember that this has to remain stabilized. You can't be moving this around. And that's the problem that we see with some of the people with connected putters, is that they're disconnected when you see the pivot point moving.
Just to interrupt for a moment, Joe, that is why, as a founder of a putter company, I realized that the length of the instrument, the putter, is really critical, and no one was really paying attention. Starting with belly putters, it becomes very obvious that almost the size of your lunch could matter. But as it evolved, really, it's crazy that regular putters, if you like, are available at 33, 34 and 35, and you have to go in there and make a choice. When you buy a car, you can get the seat adjusted to whatever fits you.
Correct, and with the adjustable length, you don't have to buy more than one putter, because if your belly is big, then you would have a belly putter that you would have to adjust to your belly. Now in this particular case, we adjusted it to my belly, and so now we have that stroke. Now we have the fixed point, and it's going to stay stabilized. But when we have this connected to the body, now we know where the pivot point is, here. And you can use your different hand positions. Vijay Singh uses his hands low with the left hand like this, for example. And so he can putt like this, back and through, and that's his stroke. But you can also use it where you connect. If you have a problem moving the pivot point, then put your left hand high, because you're not using this for any particular purpose, because basically you can putt with just your dominant hand on it.
So you see all these methods obviously this is a family when you connect to your body, and you see that these create some sort of inherent stability. That's how you view it.
Right. There's very little room for error here because we're not dealing with a wrist anymore. We're dealing with just moving the entire lever with your dominant hand. There's nothing that's going to move except the pivot point.
Of course, one thing too about this area, which I found very interesting when I got looking into it, is that we think about wrist breakdown as a problem. It's been found in studies that the loft of a putter is de-lofted 2 degrees.
That's right.
Now what that's basically saying, in an attempt to stop this left wrist collapsing, golfers basically do a bit of this. It's a push through.
Yeah.
Now one of the nice things that you get when you connect to your body is what loft you've got at address is the loft that you get at impact. So you're getting consistent loft.
Well, the pendulum principle applies that the bob is actually directly below the fulcrum.
Yep.
So the bottom of the arc is going to be consistent. If you played it back in here, for example, and you had your pivot point here, well, obviously the bottom of this is not necessarily going to be at the same place unless it's directly under the pivot point. Now the arc is going to be consistent, and the bottom of the arc is going to be right at impact with the ball, and the ball is right under the connected point. If I had the ball up in here, for example, well, and my pivot point is back in here, well, I'm going to be catching that on the upswing, and I'm not going to be able to get a true roll.
Well, you're certainly going to top it if you do that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Joe, do you want to just show how you recommend using long putter technique?
Well, the longer putter now is up in the sternum, so basically we have the same principle. We have to make sure that the pivot point is stabilized now in the sternum. So we can use the left hand high in order to make sure that it's stationary. And then we can just move the putter back and through, and we have a longer pendulum. Now, that's not difficult. It just means that you have to get the right length.
I think a lot of people who've picked up the long putter and had to play with it, I guess they got a couple of problems, is the length of it's not quite right. But the other thing is it can be pretty spectacular straight up with short putts. But a lot of people find, don't they, that it takes a lot of getting used to, and you've just got to be, if you run to this method, you've got to be patient, don't you?
Well, you do in anything that we're trying, whether it's any particular stroke that you try new. If your teacher tells you to try a new technique, it isn't just one stroke and you've got it. I mean, you have to go to the range and you have to try it. You have to go to the putting green and you have to experiment with it. So it's a matter of just getting the feel for what you're doing. But believe me, there is a lot less trouble in getting used to it when you don't have much movement. So if you just have a lever that you're dealing with and your dominant hand is moving, how much work is that? You've got your dominant hand, you move it back, you move it through. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I don't know that it's going to take you very long to get that stroke.
I did some analysis, I haven't shared this with you before, a couple of years ago. Did some analysis of all the people on tour using belly putters and all the people on tour using long putters and compared them statistically to people using conventional putting technique. And it was really interesting because by and large that group of people have turned to these connected methods because they've had trouble with the other way. And yet, statistically, they were actually better than their colleagues who were just using the normal method. So I think that says something about that if you connect to your body, you get something that inherently helps you.
There's no doubt about it. The problem that we find with most amateurs is that they haven't had a chance to experiment with it. They're not just going to go out and buy new long putters because not many of the pro shops are going to give you a technique and how to use it. But in this particular case, we have something that you can adjust yourself. You can personalize this club right now to whatever length you want. So that's the reason why most people haven't gotten to the long putter, is because when you go into the pro shop and you ask for a long putter, they probably won't have the length you want.
And I think, you know, part of this whole thing is get the length right, of course, but be patient. That's where a lot of people fall down, don't they? They after that quick fix, they think that it's just going to happen like that.
Absolutely, and most people that are regular putters, If they would only use a little bit of patience and just practice it, just a short period of time, and they eliminate the thought, oh, they don't want to be a belly, they don't want to be a sternum. Well, maybe if they just swallowed a little bit of that pride, if that's what is bothering them, that they don't want to look different, well, they're looking very similar by being a bad putter, because there's a lot of them out there.
So basically, you want to look the same as everyone else who's missing the 3-footers on a regular occurrence.
Right, and that's, so they go in and buy another putter that isn't gonna change the way they're stroking it.
So that's these people who've got 20 putters at home in the garage. They basically, what they're saying is, if I just buy the putter, it's going to solve my problems. But they need to invest in maybe find a better technique for them. And it could be regular putter, could be belly putter, could be long putter. But then the other part of the equation is just putting on the carpet, just getting used to the technique. They need to be patient, don't they?
You can do that on a carpet just like this. I mean, you can do it at putting on your carpet if it's a nice smooth carpet, putting at the table leg. It doesn't really matter. As long as you get the feel for the stroke and the distance, it's very comfortable. It doesn't really matter. 8 feet here is 8 feet out there. I mean, it might have a little bit of break to it, but 8 feet is 8 feet. And if I can make 8-footers here, I should be able to make 8-footers out there, if it's a flat putt. If it isn't, then I just have to make sure that I've got the line, and I'm going to adjust accordingly. Another style of putting, different strokes for different folks. I have seen some people that putt it better when they're looking in this position where we're doing the side saddle. Now we're in this position right here, and they're looking down, and now they're just stroking it from here, and they get a much better feel for this stroke. Now, this is obviously just a different stroke, but it might work for you. It works for some people if they just stand in this position, facing it, and they would side saddle and just stroke in this manner.
Another method related to that is putting it under the armpit.
Yes, in order to get into the armpit, that's another style. Now we can do this on either the left armpit or the right armpit. Now in this position, it's more like a conventional stroke because you are actually letting the left arm move with the stroke. And a lot of people like this. It's a good feeling, and you obviously have it stabilized here in your armpit. It's not going to move very far. It's probably going to move less here than it would in here or here, because this is really stuck in there. So you have a pivot point.
One good thing about this method, of course, is this is probably for that person who wants a bit more stability from connected putting, but maybe find some of the other methods a bit challenging. This sort of looks and feels a bit more like normal putting, doesn't it?
It does. And I think people would be more comfortable with this if they adjusted the putter up into their armpit and had the left arm just stabilizing it. Now they can do the same. But you see what the principle is again. Here's the pivot point, and now the ball is placed a little more forward. You see, it's directly under my armpit. So now if I stroke this with the dominant hand.
Yep, seems to work.
It's a very simple stroke. We have experimented with a few. Now here's one other one that might fit you. So I put it in my hip now, and the hip is a good pivot point. Now you can have this a little bit more forward of your belly, and some people like it connected a little bit lower, so now we have it into the hip. And that's where the pivot point is. Now I'm not going to be going like this. This is just going to be a pivot
So
here.
your arm here is staying against the side of your body, isn't it?
That's right. It's stabilizing the
holding it
pivot
there.
point. As long as it's connected, then you know that this is where it's hinging from. Just like this. Where's it hinging from? Right here. Doesn't matter what the connection is, that's the pivot point. So we have it now right into that position. Now, we're talking about a pendulum stroke that can go high or it can go low. Now, if you want the shortest pendulum stroke, then we can use a knee pendulum stroke. Now we have the pivot point right above the knee. Now, this is a short pendulum, so it should be easier to control for most people. So basically, all you're doing is stroking it from the knee. Now, how hard is that?
So you're keeping, the deal here is you're keeping this hand against the knee, aren't you?
Exactly, and it's stabilizing the end of it so that it can't move. So all it is like this. The hinge is right at the end of the putter, and rather than in here, because I can't really stabilize it as well as if I have the hand on it stabilizing it. but it's still the pivot point. So I'm just moving it back and through. Well, that's all there is to the short pendulum. That's about as short as you're going to get. I have no ankle putter.
Well, what about the other one though, Joe? You were telling me about the person who putts fantastically. Yeah, show me this method.
He puts in this method.
So it's right into the armpit. He holds it in there, doesn't
Just holds it right here in his armpit, and that's just a method that he uses. So he just goes back and through. Well, this is the connected method that you have to personalize. You have to fit it where you think it fits best. It could be in your hip. It could be in your elbow. So it's not just one position. We're not just saying that it has to be a belly, it has to be a sternum or whatever. Who's going to decide? You are. You're the one that's going to fit it for you. You have to experiment with it and find out, well, I tried this one. And if you want to experiment, take 10 putts with one. Take 10 putts from another one. And all it matters is that you're experimenting. You're going to find out without too much trouble which one you feel more comfortable with. This is your personal style. Find out which one you like, and that's it. But this is the way that you can experiment. Easy, adjust it, bring it up, push it down, play with it, you got it. And after 15 different types, you're going to find one.
Well, that was a great day's golf. So once again, it's all about the putting. Perhaps could you explain to me about the 3 T's you mentioned before?
Well, the 3 T's that I have developed is part of what I call the T golf technique. Basically what it is a mind and body links to playing golf. And I developed this as part of my PGA Master Professional thesis. And what it consisted of was T words that help to trigger the thoughts that help you to get through the mental game. Most people say this is a mental game, but not many people are really understanding how can they develop the mental game. But they have to understand that you have to have thoughts that create the mental game. And so the thoughts that I worked with that trigger these thoughts were T words such as think, train, trust. Those 3 major categories can go a long way into how you develop the areas of the mind and the body connection.
So these are ways of structuring the information so that you can learn and use it.
Exactly. For example, when I say the word think, that actually is relating to the psychological skills that are involved in thinking and how the mental game works. If you're talking mental, you're talking the visualization, relaxation, mental imagery. A lot of these psychological skills are part of how you think. And if you understand that, you can train those areas of your game.
So what were those again? They were...
Well, we got think, that's psychological skills. Then we have the train. Now we're getting in more of the physical ability.
Okay.
Physical training means how do you develop proper muscle memory? Now, proper muscle memory means that if you have the proper technique and you're training it properly, you're going to be able to repeat that. And that's where training gives you the feeling that subconsciously you can let it work. You can let it flow. You don't have to analyze it, break it down, be too mechanical.
Okay, so this is where the third one comes in, trust. So
Well, yes, after you can subconsciously put it into your routine, then you have this trust factor. Now, you can't trust your routine until you have trained it. So if you know how to think and you know how to train, now you can trust it.
And a lot of people, of course, they read the book, they read the magazine, so they think they've got the understanding, but they miss the middle bit, don't they? They don't put the effort in, they don't train, and
Exactly.
then how can they trust on the course?
Well, that's a major word that a lot of people have heard, but how do they develop it? Well, you can't develop it unless you know how thinking works. How does your mind operate? Well, it operates through thoughts, and these thoughts have to be key words. Thoughts are things, and if you can develop those thoughts, then you have the things that work with it.
So you were telling me before, we've got this, the think, train and trust, and as part of the trust, you were telling me that there are 3 little T's. What are they?
The 3 little T's that we have developed are very, very critical in the pre-shot routine. These T's are target. Everyone has to align to a target. They have to look from behind the ball, they have to get their intermediate spot and the long range spot. Now, target identifies what are you thinking about. That's all you need to think about when you have that word in mind, is your target. Then you identify with your touch. Now, what does touch mean? Touch is feel. That's synonymous with feel. You have touch in the handle of your club. That's not tight and tense. The 3rd T of the little T's is really the critical part, because this eliminates all of the other distractions, and it's called tempo. Now, tempo, when we break it down, is rhythm, balance, and timing. But you only need one word: tempo. Tempo.
So you're saying that that's quite useful to use some sort of auditory, or you're not necessarily saying it aloud, to use some sort of thing. This is just sort of a rhythm catcher, so you can catch your rhythm.
Everybody has to have some kind of a routine in order to be a good player. I'm not saying that every player needs to use these words, but they need to use something that's going to make it consistent. Otherwise, they get distracted, they get intimidated, they let all kinds of things distract them that they shouldn't. But once they have 3 words that they can create in their mind, then they create the action: target, alignment, touch, feel, tempo, flow.
How do you develop the touch thing? What is it? Is it just sort of allowing yourself to relax? Is it having
relaxation? As I said in the first part, the thinking, relaxation lets you feel comfortable with your hand positions. But if you're going to grip it tight and have tension, you've got your arms that are going to be so tense that you don't have a feel, especially in putting. If you don't have the feel, that's all that sensitivity in the fingertips. You've got to have that.
So you're just thinking casually, relaxed, target. You don't get a death grip on the putter, and then you just swing freely. So we've got these 3 little T's just working.
That's the way it works.
So this relates back to your thesis, doesn't it, of course, because you studied the pre-shot routines and the timing of those routines of tour players, didn't you? Under pressure and casually and so forth.
Hundreds of timing with the tour players. I've timed all of the great players through the Masters, the Ryder Cups, the U.S. Opens, and all of those tournaments to find out what does their routine consist of and how long does it take them.
And
they vary.
What does it vary between?
Well, a short routine, for example, such as Fuzzy Zeller and Chicha Rodriguez and Lee Trevino and John Daly, they have a very short routine. But they have the God-given talent that they have the feel and they can visualize. They look at the target and they can react to it. They don't even have to make sure that their alignment is correct as far as their stance, because they have that gift that they can visualize it and then relate to it. But you have somebody who has to take a long routine, like a Greg Norman or a Jack Nicklaus, and some of the players who analyze a little more. They go through the details of making sure every little detail is checked off before they make their stroke. Well, that's why Greg Norman is one of the longest routine players on the tour, and a few others that are that long. But they have to be consistent if they are going to be the best player.
So what I'm getting here is that we should have a pre-shot routine, and we should build into our pre-shot routine something for each of these little T's. So with a pro, with their pre-shot routine of being 12 or 14 or 22 seconds, are there any? Did you come upon any situations where the pro sort of, shall we say, had a meltdown under pressure, and you could see that something changed with the pre-shot routine?
The most obvious one that I was timing at the time was at the '96 Masters, and I was, at that time, I probably have timed Greg Norman more than any other player I have I really enjoyed watching him. And I believe that on Thursday, he was at the top of his routine where his timing was 26 seconds. He might have had a 25, a 27, but when you're that long, a second or two isn't going to be that critical. So you can be off just a little bit. When you have a short routine, you can't be off very many seconds or else you're going to see the difference. But in Greg Norman's situation, he had about a 65, I think, on Thursday. But then on Sunday afternoon, when he was playing with Faldo, and he had the 6-shot lead, and he folded with Faldo, I wrote a little article on this, that Norman's collapse at the Masters was a matter of routine, the lack of it. So at the second 9, he really was way off his routine.
Did he get longer or?
He was longer and shorter. He knocked the ball in the water on 12. He knocked the ball in the water on 16. He had a number of bad shots, obviously, because he lost the 6-shot lead. But he could vary his routine by 6 seconds, short or long.
I'm getting a sense that for the amateur golfer, is this a useful tool to first of all, to know that you've got a routine, and secondly, that when you're under pressure, to say, okay, all I do under pressure is I go through my routine.
Exactly.
And I go through what works for me.
Right.
And by doing that, I'm triggering all those sort of, I play the shot well.
You might be triggering them. The problem is that most people don't have for example, 3 key words that narrow their routine down. So they don't have to think of 10 different things, because that's where they get into too many thoughts or not enough thoughts. They just 3-putt the last green, and now they're distracted and they're intimidated by their opponent who just birdied the hole, and they bogeyed it, and now their routine is off. But when they can just focus on 3 words, I've got target to think of, I got touch, and I've got tempo. Now, that's easy to focus on.
What we're doing here with these 3 T's is what we're saying is, yeah, you need a pre-shot routine, it's critical, Greg Norman knows it, but perhaps you need to have some method to actually to build a pre-shot routine. And then
Right.
at the end of the day, whether you've got the 12-second one or whether you've got the 20-second one or the 30-second one, it's yours. It's a bit like having your own putting technique. You've got your own routine.
Exactly. It's your routine. Just because you use 3 words of target, touch, and tempo, your routine could be 10 seconds or it could be 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's your routine, but you've got to stick with it constantly. Here's another big factor about pre-shot routines. How many times have you seen on the range someone practicing their pre-shot routine? Very seldom.
It's very, very rare.
Rare.
Yeah.
And that's why when they get out under pressure, now they're under pressure under the gun coming in the 16th, 17th, and 18th hole, and they're looking at the score, or they're wondering about how they're going to beat their opponent, and their routine goes off. Most people don't practice the play routine and actually get into their routine as if they're playing. Here's another idea that some people might do. Practice according to the holes they're going to play. For example, they're on the tee on the practice range, and they're going to go on the first hole. So they get out their driver,
Yep.
and they go through their routine. Now they hit it up to about what they consider to be about 150 yards. Now they're going to get out their 7-iron, and they're going to stand behind it and go through their routine. They've got to practice the routine to trust it. Trust.
So would that be useful? If I was doing that before I went out, I'm getting a feeling here that, okay, I'm practicing the physical shot. I've got the 7-iron for the second one, but also I can build in there the visualization. So I can sort of pause for a moment, watch the ball in the air, and sort of feel, that's the 7-iron hitting the first green.
Right. I mean, I think that most people are practicing swing rather than the game of golf. And it's not just the swing game. You've got to be able to play the game. And you've got to play the game on the range if you expect to trust it when you're out on the course. So you got to play one shot at a time. This one-shot mentality is something that is critical, that they've got to play one shot at a time, not what's next, the hole that's going to be difficult.
So with putting, how does that relate to putting? If at the range we're hitting balls, but on the putting green before we go out, should we be just putting with one ball before we go out and play a round of golf? What should we be doing?
Well, yeah, there are different practice routines depending on what you want. If you want distance control, you can just work on distance control. and you can putt from a number of different distances. You can put a 3-footer, a 6-footer, a 9-footer, a 12-footer, and you practice the feel for each one of those. Now you got the idea, not just always practicing 12 balls from one spot. I mean, that's fine if you have trouble with a 8-footer and you want to work totally on that one. But most people just don't want to putt from one spot. They want to putt from a variety. And also, like Mickelson does, is that he has it in a circle. So now he's going to putt for the different breaks. So he just doesn't putt from the flattest lie on the green. That's the key on psychological skill of visualization. He had visualization in his mind's eye. He could visualize it. But a lot of people don't have great visualization and mental imagery. And that's why I personally would like to see people looking at the cup while they putt.
I saw you do. Yeah, I saw you on short putts. You do that.
Well, you can trust that the putter is going to hit the ball, and you can look at the cup, and that's what I do when I'm putting, is look at the cup and just putt. Trust that the putter is definitely going to hit it, especially if you're using connected putter.
Well, you were using a belly putter today,
right?
And obviously, I think, you know, this is not a hard and fast thing, but it would seem that if you're going to actually do what you do, you want to connect to your body, so you don't have any variation up and down.
No, it's very consistent, the stroke of a pendulum stroke. So you got the arcs the same, the path is the same, but similar to if you're looking at a dartboard, you're going to look at the bullseye and you're going to throw it at that dartboard. The same way with that cup. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to roll it. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to putt at it. Much better distance control. When people are putting normally, they look at the cup, but then they take their eye off the cup and they look down at the ball, sometimes a lot longer than they should. Now, what are you doing when you're looking at the ball longer than you should? You're losing sight of the cup, obviously. So now your mind's eye has to remember, let's see now, how far was that? How much break did I have? It was 6 inches, 8 inches, and you're thinking of all these things and you're in doubt. But if I'm looking at the cup, I'm not in doubt.
Well, what we're saying here is if we can get into trust, and the more we can turn putting into sort of a reactive, natural game that we're playing a little bit on instinct, really the better we're going to be. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I say, that it's more instinct and more absolutely the way that you feel about where that ball is going to go. You can see it and you can feel it. Kinesthetic awareness means you can see it and you can feel it.
Well, Joe, that's been a great talk. I've really enjoyed that. You know, I think I've got a greater sense about what the pre-shot routine is and how I perhaps could improve mine. You know, it's one of those things that, well, we all know it's important, but we don't really know exactly how to structure it, how to organize it, and how to build in the bits.
Well, I hope we've given some people some ideas on how to make it work, but I appreciate the opportunity of being here in scenic New Zealand, and I hope to be back shortly.
Well, thank you for coming, and it's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed our golf.
Thank you very much.
New Zealand, a landscape of endless diversity and one of the world's fastest growing golf destinations. In the far north you'll discover Kauri Cliffs, rated inside the top 50 courses in the world. The spectacular clifftop fairways plunge to the surging Pacific Ocean below. Northland features some of the world's most exciting marine reserves. Nearby Karikari Beach is one of New Zealand's untouched wonders. 4.5 kilometres of white sand neighbour the impressive Carrington Golf Club. Auckland, the city of sails, an urban environment populated with beautiful beaches and enchanting islands. Internationally rated Gulf Harbour Country Club, home to the country's Open Championship, has earned a reputation as a challenging tournament course. The surroundings include magnificent ocean and city views. On the stunning Coromandel Peninsula, you'll find the recently completed Lakes Resort Pauanui. The course combines the best of the region's unique Maori culture, and with its distinct tidal bunkers, is an example of modern course design. A visit to New Zealand is not complete without a stopover at the central North Island's Lake Taupo, home to some of the world's best trout fishing as enjoyed by the great golden bear Jack Nicklaus. Taupo boasts the first Jack Nicklaus course to be designed for New Zealand, Kinloch Club, and is also home to the country's first truly international golf course, Wairakei International. Formerly rated in the world's top 25 courses outside the United States, Wairakei lies on a volcanic landscape, scene of the world's largest recorded volcanic eruption. Hawke's Bay's sunny and temperate climate makes it one of the country's top wine and horticultural regions. One of the world's largest gannet colonies is just a stone's throw from the awe-inspiring Cape Kidnappers course, which is built on a ridge and valley landscape. The views from this layout are truly outstanding. Fly south to the garden city of Christchurch. The serenity of the Avon River and flowing garden landscapes make the city one of New Zealand's most attractive. Christchurch's Clearwater Resort is home to the ING New Zealand PGA Championship, the only US nationwide tour stop in the country. Further south, Terrace Downs lies in the foothills of the Southern Alps. Built on the edge of the Rakaia Gorge, it's just minutes away from some of the country's top skiing destinations. Finally, our tourist gem, Queenstown. This is the country's adventure capital, with an unbelievable array of thrilling activities on offer, and soon to have a spectacular new design, Jack's Point. Millbrook Resort has the magnificent mountain range of the Remarkables as its backdrop. It's a fitting conclusion to our tour of one of the world's fastest growing golf destinations. New Zealand, something for everyone, and an experience of a lifetime.